Wait for YouTube to do its thing. What's up, everybody? I suppose at some point I should do some kind of like actual professional intro or something, right? Right, right. Oh, man. So, we'll give it a few minutes, let people get in here. Hopefully, YouTube notifications do their thing. Uh, my microphone's being like lazy and falling over. But yeah, we'll do that for a couple minutes. I'm gonna go over some small things. So that JCMP light will be gone next week. I actually have the replacement for my Flex. I ordered the replacement light kit. Ooh, I know, so fancy. I kind of almost wish an Aqua Sky would just fit it perfectly. I know there's some people who've modified Aqua Skies to go up there, but I actually, for what I put in there, because my tank's just Crips, right? For what I put in there, it's the built-in light's actually pretty good, and it's not that expensive, which was nice. So that's going back in there. That light's going on a special project that you guys will see in a video, not this weekend, but the next weekend. What else we got going on? There's like a relatively new aquarium store not far from my house. It's catered to mostly salt, but they had some freshwater stuff. I went and checked that out. I think last weekend or whatever. It all kind of blurs together for me. Like so much stuff goes on. Some things blur together, but it was kind of a neat little shop called Barrier Reef. They had some decent plants though, which I found interesting. So I picked up some of the plants that you'll probably see soon. I picked up yeah, it's just like some random stuff that's been going on. The pupper, for those who care, my dog Lulu, that had her surgery. She just had her sutures out earlier today. It was like one of many things I had to get done today. I actually like technically did not work, and yet I worked in the morning, in the afternoon, and I just finished doing a bunch of reports. But you know, workaholic, right? So she's doing really, really good. For those of you that have been asking and saying all sorts of stuff, you're fantastic. Her surgeon had took the sutures out, said she was looking really, really good. She can go back to full whatever she did before, basically. So we're hoping with a little bit more, a few days, just to let her kind of adjust, because like we're allowed to start pulling her out of living in a cone. She's lived in a cone for like 6 months now, just for the various issues she was having. So we're trying to let her slowly adjust to that, right? Because that's new. But once she gets adjusted, we're hoping that she, her sister, which is Shantoto, and then eventually Papalimo, we can all slowly get them used to each other and playing and all that kind of good doggy stuff. One more like dumb story as I let people get in here. So in the mornings, I take Shantoto out for a walk. Shantoto's the dog who's in my bedroom. And for those who are like, why are your dogs in different rooms? It's a long story. Anyway. So I take her for walks, and she's my most shy dog. And my other two dogs are both really person friendly. So Papalimo and Lulu are super people oriented, love people. So I've been taking her on walks. I live kind of in a cul-de-sac that's tucked away, so I'll try to walk her kind of out of the cul-de-sac and around and back in about 15 minutes or so, just short, because she's so skittish. If she sees a car, a person, whatever, she'll want to run home. So the perfect example of this, I'm walking her this morning, and my neighbor, like 2 houses away, gentleman by the name of Mike, is out there on his front porch on his little bench with his laptop in a bathrobe, having a morning cigarette because he's a smoker. Real nice dude. Sees me walking the dogs. Hey, Bentley. Hey, little pup. And she stops in her tracks, just looks up at him. I'm sitting there like, it's okay. It's just Mike. He's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to hurt you. And immediately she just turns toward the house and just the full power, just yanking as hard as she can. And I mean, she's 27 pounds, but for 27 pounds, she's just like yanking my arm like this, right? And I just hear my neighbor laughing as I'm trying to explain how skittish she is, and finally like, okay, I'm just gotta let her go home, or she's gonna like choke herself or something. So had her drag me all the way back to the house. Slowly try to work on getting her more used to like being socialized and seeing people, because the two girls, we got them, and the very next weekend was when Washington State went into its lockdown for the human malware, right? So basically, they've never been able to socialize, unlike Papa Limo, who for the first basically 2.5 months that we had him was very frequently going to see our family friends, because that was while we were I was helping with the video game, and my significant other would go spend time with our friends and just kind of like hang out with them, basically, and with the boy and stuff. So he got super socialized really early, and the girls did not. And one girl, the one that had her surgery, she loves people. The other girl, not so much. But we're working on it, right? All right, so let's talk about this. I've spoken at a club before, and that's a really small club here in Seattle. Well, I guess the northern portion of Washington, called the North Sound Aquarium Society. And this was like it's on my channel. It's an informal talk about plants, because it is super informal. We're like in this side banquet room in a restaurant, but I liked it because it was like a bullet point conversation, and I wanted it to be a little more relaxed and chilled, just more talking about plants. Where this is formal, in the sense that for those of you who've maybe watched some of the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society or Maasai speakers, this is a more formal presentation. So I'm speaking for the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, my home club, in, I think it's October. I think we said October. We're hoping that that will be live back in actual person, but with all the things going on with pandemic, it's hard to know whether it'll be virtual or not. So if it's virtual, I'll give you guys a link. If it's in person live, I will have a recording of it, and then it'll go up on my channel. So one way or another, I'll find a way to get it up on the channel. Because if I'm here doing it right, I can just record it. But I kind of want to, like, I have a couple ideas in my head, and I almost want to have like this interactive conversation with you guys about what you think would be interesting. So first, let's get one thing out of the way. Mike Kenseth, thanks, man, for the super chat. Little dab in the buck up there. I appreciate it, man. But so the general theme is plants, right? I'm a plant guy. I'm the top leading, whatever you want to call it, point earner, because they do a point-based system. But basically, for our horticulture awards program, as far as for whoever wants to submit points, I have the most in the club by the landslide. But I have a couple things, like, you know, so of course they want me to talk about plants and like talk about, you know, tricks, secrets, whatever, right? It is kind of left very open to me. So I had a couple ideas, because I love talking about plants, obviously. I answer questions about it all the time. I do videos on it all the time. I answer or topics and live streams all the time. Like, I love talking aquatic plants and fish. That's easy peasy for me, right? It's always fun. So I have a couple ideas, and some of them like I kind of cover in videos, but formalized talks allow you to have a slightly different energy, right? Because you're in person, or at least presenting more like a live stream would. So actually, Paul, so Paul Sotero's got a really cool idea in chat here, which is to mix it up and talk about how plants help stabilize water parameters. They do and they don't, right? But that's interesting. It stabilizes like your filtration side of water parameters, not necessarily say hardness or pH and those things. But interesting idea. So my first thought was talking about how understanding nutrients for our plants and identifying deficiencies can help a lot of people get out of struggling with plants. Right, so I covered that a little bit in a video where we talked about like the Fertilizer 101 series, where we identified the macros and micros and what they do, and some of the most common issues we see in plants that tell you like, oh, it's missing this. Right, that's kind of my first idea. And I workshopped it in my head for a little bit because I need to, with my schedule, probably prepare this thing before September so that I have time to like walk it through in practice a little bit, just so that I know in my own head what I have there and kind of walk through how I would do it in order to then make changes if I feel like something's wrong. And then my second idea was a little different, which was talking about the way that my general philosophy on how I treat plants at home. So this can kind of include like how I fertilize my tanks, how I use CO2 and where I use CO2. The fact that I keep plants often based on, for me, for a while, was how well they sold when I was doing more plants for profit type stuff and actually selling plants myself very actively. I would keep plants that sold regularly more. And if I had a plant that where it seemed like for a month or two, no one had any interest in it whatsoever, I would just get rid of that plant at a local auction and remove it from that space. That's part of why I've grown so many plants, is I would very aggressively look at plants and go like, you're no longer cutting the mustard, get out. Right, I just kicked the plant out, whether I liked it or not. Because in some cases, I like those plants. But for me, my grow space was dedicated also to, like, making some amount of money. Because back then, part of that was while I was unemployed, right? We talked about that recently in a video. And part of that was also when I was trying to kind of get myself back on my feet when I started my new job at the time, which is back when I worked at Intel, my previous job. And so I was kind of like getting back on my feet, and I did a lot of plants. I'd plan events and auctions and stuff like that in order to supplement my income, basically to pay bills, right? And literally paid bills at one point with my plants. Mostly fish-related bills, but still paid bills. So that was kind of like a second idea I had. Play's idea: set up an email to have us viewers send you photos of our plant issues and deficiencies so you can help build small segment focused on basically direct help. So you mentioned that. We're in the middle of voting for the final name, which if you haven't done that, go to the community tab at the end of the stream, vote for the name of the new series, because that's kind of what we're doing in the new series for the channel, and I don't want to take that away from the channel itself. Mostly because those doing that kind of stuff, while it's interesting, I'm not sure. It'd be great if I was doing it like where I wanted to talk about here's a deficiency in a plant, here's how you identify it, and this, when you understand these things, it's easier to keep your plants going healthy and be successful with them. If I go that route, yeah, it'd probably be pretty good. But very often the most common issue is what I see a lot of, which tends to be, some kind of imbalance that's allowing algae issues or something like that. This is my most common, let's be honest, but sometimes you get some of the neat stuff like, oh, you're presenting like this, but you've tested for it and you see this. So it's actually this thing that isn't as obvious, right? To get these weird scenarios. Those I kind of want to save for the new series, which right now I think In-Depth Solutions is currently winning the race, but I'm going to let it be up for like a week, see what people think. So Joe Davis is asking, do you know what the crowd will be like ahead of time? That could help you gauge the depth of your talk. Failing that, we can teach others through our own failures. So the crowd is my local club for the most part. And there's a lot of people in the club who grow plants. Like, you probably say like 95% of our club grows plants. There's a lot of like planted tank enthusiasts in the club. Very few people who are like more cichlid oriented or more like African cichlid where you have less plants. Almost everybody keeps some level of plants, and a lot of people are very enthusiastic about plants. You have quite a lot of like nanofish and shrimp keepers, so you've got people who also are really into aquascaping. And I think that's part of why they generically are like, hey, Bentley, do you want to talk about plants? Or more accurately, I think it was like, we would really like it if you would talk about plants. um, but yeah, I mean, so that's the good thing is like anything that gives plant tips in some way, shape, or form, which anything I do on plants is going to do that, right? It will be good because a lot of people are maybe only doing low tech or are struggling with certain things, and a lot of that has to do with like Seattle's water, because Seattle's water for the most part is very, very, very soft water. There's so little in it. But yeah, that's kind of cool. I get what you're saying though, and yeah, definitely you want to cater to crowds and things like that. uh Fishaholic, who's down in Olympia, is asking like which fish club and when. That's going to be the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. If it's in person, which we don't know, we'll be playing it by ear, basically with the rules and regulations from the governor. But that will be the second Tuesday in October. I'm really I'll put like way ahead of time. I'll put information out on the community tab for people, and I'll be mentioning it in live streams as it's coming up. Especially like as I figure out my topic. But I kind of wanted some open discussion with you guys, because so often in our live streams, a lot of the things that I would probably talk about are similar like back and forth that we have with questions here in the live stream. So it's almost kind of like workshopping with people who would be similar to a live audience, because if you're watching my live stream, you're probably interested in the same thing I would talk about in a club, right? Or for some reason, like you're torturing yourself with stuff you're not interested in. I don't know. But, yeah. Joe Davis, you can structure the talk around a series of failures and what they taught you. Oh man, story of my life. Learning off failure. Knight Rider, I would do deep thoughts about the future of the hobby relating to plants, how people engage with them, what will change, etc. No, you actually have an interesting concept. So, trends in the hobby are a big thing, because like I can think in this area especially, there have definitely been some big trends, at least from my perspective growing up in this area. Like there was a big period of time, especially in the 90s, where African cichlids were the thing in Seattle, which is so funny because our water is so soft. You have to do so much work to get African cichlids happy, because you need that high mineral content, that more alkaline pH, all those kind of things, right? And there's none of that in in Seattle's water. I mean, our water is a little it's not like alkaline, but it's not super acidic, so it's like 7.2 typically out of the tap most of the time. But yeah, there's like nothing in it, and you need really heavy mineral content for a lot of the Africans to be successful. That's why they're so popular in like the Midwest, just because the well water and stuff that's out there out of the tap, that liquid rock is like perfect for those fish. But you know, there's been all these like ebbs and flows of what's popular. There was a while where saltwater was huge and not a lot of freshwater, and now freshwater planted tanks have gotten really big, and saltwater is kind of creeping back in too. It's really interesting to watch the hobby in your local area if you've been there for a long time. Hoon Aquatics, sneak something about rainbows in there. Oh, you know I will talk about rainbows. Come on, man. It's me. I will always talk about rainbows. That's probably like every picture will feature a rainbow. It'll be like rainbows in a planted tank. That's almost guaranteed. And guys, at this point, feel free to just at Bentley Pasco in the chat. If I miss your question, like, don't be afraid to repost it. Just don't spam it too much, okay? You know, if it's like 5 minutes and you haven't seen something, maybe 10, because we know I'm really talkative, repost it. Oh, this is great. Bob Purcell. Like, I think this is actually... I should take notes. That would be smart, right? Would it be smart to take notes at something like this? This is actually a really good topic in general, is transitioning from low to high tech. That's super good. I think no matter what I talk about, I need to have something about that. Because a lot of people start low tech and they get afraid of going to high tech because the cost can be daunting for some people, but there's a lot of ways to get into it much cheaper. But that's it, really, really, really good. Really, really good. I think if I did not talk about that, I would feel terrible about myself in the long run. Well, yeah, Kelly Foreman, African cichlids totally should be a thing in the Midwest. Your water is perfect for them. They eat that stuff all day, and even some rainbows do too. But out here, it's discus grow so easily because our water has nothing in it, and you can literally just do water out of the tap, and it's perfect for discus. Where in Ohio, oh no, you got to do some work. Unless you get the hard water discus, right? Which they're out there, the Stencar discus, but yeah. Yeah, Joe Davis, Vancouver's water system is changing to less acidic water to stop pipe corrosion. So we don't have acidic water by nature. Our water is slightly basic, but yes, they do buffer it with a little bit to help protect the pipes. And the reason why I know that is if I aerate my water for 24 hours, I'll see pH crashes if I don't have something to buffer, because there's nothing in there to hold the pH. But the pH comes out of the tap at 7.2. But after aeration, those things that are holding that pH gas out, and the water just, boom, nosedives. So the big thing is crushed coral is almost a necessity in Washington unless you have fish that really love super soft, that soft acidic water. And then you're basically perfect. So aka discus, right? Discus do phenomenal here. Stephen P. Another topic, patience. And should we just call it just patience? Just one big screen in a PowerPoint presentation, because I'll have to build a PowerPoint that just says patience, and that's it. I just stand there and say nothing. It's secretly a way to see how patient people are. You just stand there and do nothing, kind of see it out until it gets really really awkward. But patience, how so many plants are sold immersed, can make you feel like failure when all you really need to do is wait for plants to convert. Yeah, conversion, definitely. How plants are sold versus how we want them, right? See, this is secretly, you guys are actually, just by listening to me babble, turning into the real plant masters. And then I don't actually have to be good at plants anymore. I can just rely on you guys to make any presentation I ever have to make at a club. It's secret galactic brain level thoughts, right? Okay, elephant in the room. JDW Aquatica. First, thank you for the $20 super chat. Much appreciated. Never required, but, they do make me feel really good. What would suck the potassium out of my 125-gallon, heavily planted tropical community tank? I dose liquid potassium once a week. Most of my various species of Anubias, as well as massive Amazon sword, still have small holes in the leaves. Okay, so first off, have you actually tested your potassium? So there's some interesting, we're going to get into this in a sec, but I talked about this recently in a different video where certain species of plants, though this is most common in Hygrophila pinnatifida, but certain species of plants will get holes in their leaves and will think it's a potassium problem when they can get holes for other reasons, and they actually have plenty of potassium. So first off, have you bought a potassium testing kit and tested the potassium level? Because if you're somewhere between I think it's between 15 and 20 parts per million, and I think the safe levels go up to 30 if I remember correctly, you're fine on potassium. So if you haven't, get that kit and test. That's the first thing you really want to know. Now, from there, big question, and I'll have to scroll down the chat just to make sure, because you're probably going to respond to some of the stuff I'm saying. Do you have any plecos in that tank? So we can see holes in leaves that will look like potassium deficiency or some kind of nitrate deficiency when we actually have plecos in there, and those plecos are like nibbling on leaves, especially with swords. Swords, they love eating swords, like bristlenoses and swords. They're best friends for the bristlenose, not for the sword, because the sword's just going to get chewed up and not be very happy. Right? So there's a couple questions we want to ask ourselves. Definitely, JDW, shoot me an email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Just put JDW Aquatica in your title, right? Let me know, like, if you test potassium and kind of what's all in your tank. Because we can diagnose this typically without having those kits, but if you do test it, it helps. Sci-Fi Swordsman, do you have a lead on a potassium test kit? Okay. I used to know one. I stopped testing potassium personally just because I kind of have a feel for my tank and what I need. But there was... I know there's something that lets you test it. Like, I thought I was in one of the saltwater-oriented test kits. But maybe I'm, like, losing my mind. Which, you know, wouldn't be all that different from normal. I might have to come back on that, like, at another time. Okay, so you tested for potassium, and it was readable but low. 1 bristlenose pleco. I would gamble. There you go. Mr. Singh's got us covered with the potassium kit. You have 1 bristlenose pleco. Almost guaranteed that bristlenose is taking little nibbles. However, like I said, shoot me a couple pictures in an email. And I should be, if I can see it relatively well, I should be able to tell you whether it's the plecos or whether we need to address something else. Because sometimes in certain plants, it can be iron can cause this issue. If you have too much iron, they actually will like start developing holes like it's a potassium deficiency. This is most commonly seen with Hygrophila pinnatifida, but it does affect some other plants. And there's a few other niche cases where some plants will be deficient in one thing, and it presents itself like a potassium deficiency. So if you can shoot me like the whole parameters of your tank, your fertilizer regime, especially like if you're EI dosing, liquid all-in-ones, whatever, shoot me that data, and I'll put you kind of on a priority. You gave me a super chat, I gotta help you a little bit, right? Right? But potassium, one thing is, like, as Paul Sotero, Paul, you're just the best. You know more than I do. But potassium deficiency can affect your photosynthesis. So it can present itself as a lot of different problems that aren't necessarily just potassium. But yeah, shoot me an email. We'll walk through it and figure it out. Try to get everything dialed in and figured out. And it might just be a hungry bristlenose, because bristlenose will just eat and 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 eat, right? They have bottomless stomachs. And then they produce a lot of poo because they're plecos, and that's how they roll. Oh, man. Deborah Saunders, so kind of tapping into this a little bit, right? I have a problem with holes forming in some of my plants. Tried potassium, but still occurring. Not sure how much to use or how often. So, in general, if we can be testing potassium, we want to keep, kind of like how there's that suggestion from, say, Corey Aquarium Co-op probably says this the most, but a lot of planting people try to get your nitrates between 10 and 20 parts per million constantly whenever you test, because that just tells you have enough available for the plants to continuously be photosynthesizing and consuming and growing and all those kind of things, right? Potassium is similar. We want it somewhere in like the 15 to 30 range. I typically target when I'm making suggestions to people who actively test, that is about 20. 15 to 20 is where you really want to shoot for. That's just enough where you're not getting like too much, but where the plants should have sufficient amounts, unless you have a ton of Java Fern, then you might want to push slightly higher. I would say in general, it depends on how you dose most of your fertilizer. So if you're dosing fertilizer like every other day, then you probably want that a very small amount, a minute amount of that potassium to go into the system at the same time. If you dose once a week. Now, me personally, I tend to prefer dosing, and I use mostly all-in-ones. I very rarely dose individual things except for additional iron in a couple of tanks. I dose every other day. That just spreads my ferts out, and in tanks where I have CO2, I dose every day. But I dose a small amount, right? I'm just trying a continual low dose of fertilizer. That way my plants kind of constantly have something and they can fight algae off. Typically when I find algae problems, it's because I broke my habit of like a small dose, and I'll like I did a water change, I better dose fertilizer, and I'll put in like, in a 40-gallon breeder or something, I'll put in my 4 to 5 pumps, depending on how dense the plant load is at the time. And I'll spike all those nutrients. And the algae gets a chance to actually get something where the plants were taking everything previously. So it's all about how we do things and what has kept our ecosystem the way it is, so especially if we're not having algae issues, and trying to make sure that we're just doing a small tweak to help those plants, but not overbearing the system to where algae can take advantage of it. Big thing there is making sure algae can't take advantage of it. Mike Stambaugh, I bet you can't wait to get a hold of one of the co-op's new aquarium lights when they are released. Yeah, so I was actually listening to Corey's stream when he was talking about that a little bit, and how do I put this? It was hard not to be sarcastic in chat. Granted, I was working, so it made it kind of easy not to be interacting with chat. I had it on just in the background while I was doing some work. But it was hard to like not put something in chat. It's almost like you need a professional tester or something. But I mean, Corey knows if he wants me to like test something, he'll talk to me, right? And if he doesn't, he won't. He probably knows that I'll eventually buy it and check it out and figure it out. Whatever, right? I'm curious to see what, with Corey's experience, because he's very experienced in the hobby, what he deems the combination of things that are right for an aquarium light and what he puts together. So for me, I value control and flexibility. So I want to be able to control a light to where I can have it go low light, medium light, high light, to be a CO2 or no CO2 tank, to be able to adjust my parameters kind of however I want. And I really like doing it if I can set my own curves. Like, that's why I love those Fluval lights, right? Because I can mess with it pretty much however the heck I want. Where, say, like this JCMP light, it's kind of just on and off. Now I can dial the levels in a little bit, but not as much as I'd like to. But considering the difference in price, I kind of have to nod and smile and accept that, yeah, for 1/3 the price, I'm not going to get as much control. So I'm curious the set of features that Corey targets, and then what that price range turns into, right? Are we going to see something that's trying to compete directly against the Fluval plant light? Are we going to see something that's closer to like the Phoenix Stingray, where it's a little more budget friendly? You know, those are the questions that are in my head when it comes to whatever Corey's cooking up. But supposedly 2 years in development, roughly. So I'm curious to see it. Very, very curious. And then I wish I was closer to hear your club talk. I'll put it online. Like, I think one of the things, my club usually has agreements with speakers that they will only make their recordings available to members. But I'm gonna specifically request the recording so that I can put it on my YouTube channel. And I'm sure I'll get some fight back from that. And that just means that I'll bring my own camera equipment and record it myself. But, it'll be one of those things where I'll talk to the person who does the recordings and just be like, hey, man, I would like to make this available to everyone. It doesn't have to, if through my YouTube channel, it doesn't have to be exclusive to the club. Can I have your recording, or do I need to make my own? And it'll probably be about as short as that. Because if it's make my own, I just know I need to bring my camera gear. If I can just borrow the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society's footage and do my own edit or whatever, then that's much easier for me. All right, let's see here. Let me get back to questions. Kathy B, I'll never do high tech. I have a real from a previous gas incident, aka explosion. So you know what? When I first was starting to do CO2, I had a couple gas explosion incidents, and that's part of what changed a couple of my philosophies. One, my philosophy on making sure I do not buy a cheap regulator, and two, changing the way that I do my CO2. So I've said this a million times and I'll keep saying it. I do what I call the American barbecue method. Low and slow. I have found in my experience it leads to not excessive growth so that I can still kind of keep up with it. I don't have to maintain a tank like every week, but gives me just the right amount of extra density, color, etc., and including letting some of those more demanding species actually survive, that I can have a lot of success. So consider that. I mean, I understand when you have a gas off that happens, and usually that tends to be cheaper regulators, it sucks. I'm very lucky that I did not lose fish when mine gassed off, because I was kind of there as it was happening, and did like a massive water change and just like got extra air pumps and just pumped a ton of oxygen in my water. But had I not been right there, I would have lost a ton of rainbows in one of my biggest tanks, and it would have sucked. And I would be right there with you, right? I would be skittish, but I have an almost bulldog personality when it comes to being persistent about things. So I just kept at it, and I found what works perfect for me. Mickey M, rainbow question. Easy. How common is it getting albino fry for rainbows? Thinking of breeding Glossolepis pseudo-incisus. So, I'm not sure how they got albinos in that line. I haven't looked into it because me personally, I'm not huge on albino fish. But that being said, in my experience, very rare. I think certain fish are more likely to have it occur, but there's very clearly a process that was done to get the albino millenniums, because it kind of started at one place and then from there has slowly proliferated into the hobby. Whereas you don't really see like albino bosemani, albino turquoise. You kind of only see it in one fish, right? So it's one of those things where I think if you're going to try and breed that fish, you might almost want to start with the albino to begin with. But if your goal is to breed them and you're wondering how often am I going to get an albino in that group, then that's very rare. I would think you are not likely to see more than one in maybe 200 to 300 fish, if that. It might be even less. I'd be curious. Like, Hoon Aquatics has bred quite a few rainbows recently, and I mean within the last 2 years or so. I'd be curious if he's seen any albinos out of anything he's bred, because he's bred in some pretty good numbers for not somebody who's been in the rainbow game for 10, 20 years, right? He's really doing a lot of good fish. So I'd be curious. I've never had any, but I haven't bred that many fish yet. Deborah Saunders has mentioned that one of her tanks has a pleco and the others has hillstream loaches. They will also nibble. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. They have flat surfaces. Yeah. But yeah, we'll get that one fixed. Chris Trapp, what parameters should I test to ensure plant success? Really easy. Nitrate, ammonia, nitrite. General hardness, carbonate hardness, sometimes pH. Seriously, you don't need a lot. And the reason why is really simple. You don't have to necessarily test parameters to identify whether your plants are healthy or not. Now, in some weird cases, like an example, we talked about that potassium deficiency issue earlier. But we have a good feeling that potassium's correct looking at tests, right? So now we can say, okay, now we might need to test some other things to see what's going on, or maybe think outside the box beyond just how we're dosing nutrients to the plants about what could cause an issue, right? Typically, you only need the basics. As long as things are stable, testing doesn't matter as much as how you fertilize the tank and what that regime looks like, and then comparing that to the light you're providing and whether or not you have CO2. And if you do have CO2, how much, right? Because if we're seeing health issues, there's kind of like a triangle of power, right? You've got fertilizer, light, CO2. There's always going to be some level of CO2, but we need that carbon. That carbon's very, very important. And liquid carbon doesn't provide it in a way that is uptaken as well as gaseous CO2. Most liquid carbon is there to act as an algicide. Some small amounts will get absorbed, yes, but not the way that it does when it's injected CO2, pressurized CO2, right? So when we're seeing issues with our plants, we can look at those three things and start narrowing down the problem. Because it's not always a deficiency in how we fertilize. Sometimes it's, well, we're putting in a lot of fertilizer and we've got CO2, but we're not pushing enough light, right? So like we're seeing a great example of this would be if your lower part of your plants are melting a lot and don't have leaves or don't have healthy looking leaves, but the upper parts of your plants do, and you have a pretty good fertilizer regime, and you're injecting a little bit of CO2, you can look at those two things, right? I'm doing this. Why is the low part? Oh, the light's not strong enough. It's not penetrating down and getting down to that lower area. So those plants aren't able to continuously photosynthesize that portion of the plant. So it's sacrificing that part to keep the other parts healthy. It's consuming that part of the plant. Conversely, we could be, in certain plants, depending on our general hardness and pH, not delivering the right nutrients to the root of the plant to keep the bottom of the plant healthy. So that wouldn't tell you could be testing nitrates all day long, or you could test potassium all day long. But if you don't test your water hardness and your pH, you won't know to look for that. And that's not even a common scenario, right? So there's these little things like that you just kind of pick up along the way. The big things are the main things we normally test in our water for our fish anyway. And then kind of identifying that little triangle, right? And playing with that part when we start seeing problems. I hope that helps you like get on the way that I look at things, because I'm sure someone would say, "Oh, you need to test for this, and you need to test for that, and you need to test for this." Sometimes we can rely too heavily on a test and not enough on thinking at the broader picture, right? The small picture is the nutrients we give our plants and testing for some kind of imbalance or some kind of deficiency. The broader picture is we have an ecosystem in our aquarium. And there's lots of parts of that ecosystem. There's the fish within it. There's the substrate within it. There's how we fertilize. There's the light. There's the power of the light, the duration of the light, whether or not we have a significant carbon source, or whether we're like in that low-tech range where we're relying entirely on exhaled CO2 from our fish, right? This whole ecosystem has a lot of variables. And if we zoom in too much on just water parameters and not, well, water parameters is one piece of the puzzle, we lose sight of what the answer can be because we'll focus so heavily on that. My parameters look good. My parameters look good. Why is this wrong? Maybe I need to. Maybe I don't have the right test kit. I'll go get this test kit and test for this. I'll go get this test and test for this. When we could have probably just gone, well, okay, my sword plant isn't looking so good. My lights are on 8 hours a day. I've got pretty high light and CO2. I fertilize using this method and it's been good for this long, or it never was good. Well, what else is in the tank? Well, I got a couple bristle. Oh, they're eating the plant, right? Little things like that. It's when we pull ourselves back a little bit, look at the big picture, look at the whole ecosystem of that aquarium, that we can find the answer that narrow focus would miss every time. Now, sometimes, right, it's like, well, my leaves are light green and all the veins are dark green. So the veins look really healthy, but the leaves look really pale. That's typically a nutrient deficiency. And we can look up the nutrient deficiency chart and just look at the picture and go, that's this and this. Oh, that's this problem, right? Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes the complex problems require us to like stop trying to be super specific and pull back and look at the whole picture. And instead of pulling on just one little string, pulling on all the strings. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of like a weird philosophical approach to aquarium problems, but I have found a couple times in my own experience where I focused too much on one or two little things and I missed the real problem for like 2 months. And I didn't realize it until after I'd like completely nuked a plant what the real problem was. And then I knew in the future I'd never had that problem again. So I hope that helps. Like, don't rely too much on tests. They help, but the basic stuff is really all you need. All right, big chat jump, catching me up because I've been talking way too long on one topic. Fishy Mailman, your experience is Hygrophila augustifolia, super nutrient hungry. No CO2, the only other plants are Java fern and a few boosts. Thai lilies dosing 7 to 10 easy green daily. How big is your tank to keep 20 to 40 ppm? Dang, that's a lot of fertilizer. So a lot of hygrophilas are really aggressive growers. And sorry, it's angustifolia. I said augustifolia. My apologies. But yeah, I mean, yes, it is a more hungry plant because it is kind of an aggressive grower, or can be at least. A lot of hygrophilas are like that, except for like the compactas. They're about the only ones that are kind of like chill if you allow them to be. But I'd be curious like what you're seeing happening in the plant, because certain plants really do like seem to just struggle without a slightly higher amount of CO2 available. And sometimes that's just like overstocking your tank, or sometimes that is injecting CO2. It's not always, but I've seen certain plants look just horrible in a low-tech tank where like all my other plants have done fine, even plants of the same species, or same genus, not species. So an example would be Pogostemon stellata. So not Stellatus octopus, but stellata. In low-tech tanks, it gets like really strung out and not very dense, and it has a lot less leafage. You give it literally 1 bubble per second CO2 in a 40 breeder, and it's this dense, hyper beautiful, like dark purple under the leaf looking plant. It looks like a completely different plant with just a touch of CO2. The smallest amount. But without it, it looks like weird and stringy and bleh. Yeah. So, yes and no. Yes and no, that it's super nutrient hungry. But in general, a lot of Hygrophilus tend to be. Paul Saltero, what was the name of the rainbow species with the same coloration as Bosemani? So you're talking, I think the ones I talked about last week, those are a species of Radnocentris ornatus. Specifically, the picture I had up was, I think Carlin Creek or Ceres Creek. I can't remember which one. Ceres and Carlin both can look kind of Bosemani coloration, but in this like teeny tiny torpedo looking fish, and they're gorgeous. Gorgeous fish. I love rads. Rads are rad, man. They really are. Kathy B, my tap water was high GH, so very high like mineral content, but low KH, so not a lot of carbonate hardness. The pH is 6.8. Isn't that odd? Does anyone else have this situation? So I've actually seen that where people are dosing a GH booster after doing RO water, but they had pH crashes because they didn't have carbonate hardness to hold that pH buffered correctly. Because KH is what buffers our pH better than anything. General hardness, not necessarily, right? So kind of, it seems weird, right? Because we just assume hard water will have high pH, but not always. It's more about that carbonate hardness. Let that chair get all squeaky. I've seen it before, though. I've had some friends have problems with that. And it took like 3 weeks to figure it out. When I was helping a friend locally, who now is no longer local at all, and lives in a place where there's tons of everything in their water. They went to Florida. Whoa, a chat jumped on me again. Of course it did. Let's see here. Your name is a line. Well, that's interesting. What are your thoughts on Joey, King of DIY? Well, I don't even think King of DIY is an appropriate name for him anymore. He doesn't do DIY, but Joey's podcasts. I've never watched them. I have no interest in them. I like his old content, and he doesn't do that anymore. So, the thing is, like, there are so many good creators that sometimes the biggest creators aren't the ones that interest me anymore. Like, I used to watch a lot of Dustin's Fish Tanks. I used to watch a lot of KG Tropicals. And now, like, I'll tune into occasional live stream from KG Tropicals because I like John and Lisa live. They're very entertaining, right? It's very fun to hear what they're talking about. And a lot of times their lives are while I'm driving home from work or about to drive home from work. Like, I basically don't watch Dustin anymore. And part of that is just I found smaller channels that are doing stuff that pique my interest a little more. And that's not saying that, like, the big channels don't do great content. They do great content. But it's just, for me, I have a limited amount of time I can dedicate to watching videos. So it has to really be something that interests me. Like, I've said this several times. Like, Jadgered Aquatics is a channel right now that I do not miss a video for. He's, like, doing all this fish room stuff. He's got all this kind of crazy stuff going on where he's potentially, like, selling his house in order to get a, like, different building as a fish room because of the way the market is for him in Texas. And just what he's doing is interesting to me. Like, I get little peeks into his life in a way that is more relatable to me than someone, say, like Joey, right? I just don't relate to him at all. So it's hard for me to want to watch his content. Because if I don't relate to somebody, it's really hard to keep me engaged. And Yeah. I don't care about the drama side. I really don't want to step into that because I was asked by someone not to. I hope that makes sense. But basically, do I watch his podcast? Not at all. No interest. But people like it. People watch it. Great. If you enjoy them, enjoy them. If you don't enjoy them, don't watch them. Perfect, right? Find the stuff you enjoy, watch that. There's like a bajillion aquarium creators. Find the ones you like and watch those. Just like it. Joe, can low-tech tank have a Fluval 302 and CO2 without being high-tech? So most people's definition of high-tech is it has CO2. I personally think that this is the worst way to define a tank. Because if you're putting everything else on a tank other than CO2 that would be like a really high level ADA aquascape tank, your tank is high tech. If you're putting a Fluval 3.0 or multiple Fluvals, you've got one of those little what is it, the sterilizers that creates oxygen by firing an electric pulse in your water, and it creates that like mist of oxygen in your water, and you've got a really expensive filtration setup, and you're doing this and that. You have a high-tech setup. The only thing you don't have is injected CO2. I hate the low-tech, high-tech definition. I use it because people know it, but I think it is the wrong way to think about the definition of high-tech and low-tech. Like, I would define a low-tech tank as lots of non-demanding plants or very little planting, lower light, and more simpler filtration. And I would define a high-tech tank as whether or not it has CO2, having more demanding plants, or a more complex filtration system, typically both, but in the case of tanks that do not necessarily have a lot of plants in them, if you have a really complex filtration system and a lot of equipment, maybe you're using the Felix system, right, that's out, which I won't get into that, but maybe you're using it, right? You're using a lot of tech in your tank, even if you don't have CO2. That's still high tech. I prefer looking at a tank as like, with or without CO2 injection, is it low light, high light, medium light, right? I think it's easier to gauge a tank instead of going like, oh, you have CO2 in that tank, it's high tech. My 40 breeder right now is flowering plants like crazy. I put almost no CO2 into it, and it's got a aqua sky on it. That's not high tech. It's not. Now, if I swap back to my Fluval Plant 3.0, where I'm going to be dumping like twice as much light power on it, and I crank my CO2 up to like 5 or 6 bubbles a second, now it's high tech, right? It has multiple filters on it, so you could argue it's technically gauging toward a more complex filtration system. It's extremely densely planted, but none of the plants in there are very high demand. They all will do well in low and medium light. But because it has a little bit of CO2, it can handle higher amounts of light. But it's at very low CO2. So is that high tech just because there's CO2? Or is it low tech that features CO2 injection? Right? It's just, as somebody who works in the technology field, the way that we define high and low tech, and you can call this a rant, that's fine, but the way that we define high and low tech is wrong. Just pouring some gas into your tank does not suddenly make it high tech. It just drives me crazy because it's an old mentality of thinking. But as someone who works in a technology field, that being the differentiator between high and low tech is one of the things that like drives me up the walls. I just kind of accept it in many times because it's how the hobby has gotten used to it. But if I could retrain the hobby as a whole, that is the first thing I would do. CO2 does not equal high tech. The whole system is either high or low tech, but can just feature CO2 injection. Oh, man. Gonna drive me crazy on this stuff. Yeah, Kelly Foreman's got a great, like, George Farmer, I think, is a similar mentality in that liking the high versus low energy classification. I much prefer the way that George Farmer discusses that than what we normally accept to be high and low tech. Bob Purcell, what creator that Bentley just say he likes? Jadron Aquatics. So that's Jason. There's actually quite a few. Like, so I like Primetime Aquatics too. I like a lot of creators. It's just there's a difference between the creators I watch in small binges. So like an example would be Tank Tested, right? He doesn't bring out videos that often, but when he does, I watch them. Right? Or there's maybe a better example is like MD fish tanks. I like MD fish tanks. However, I don't watch every video he puts out. I will very frequently like watch him once a month and binge 2 or 3 of his videos. I'll bounce through a couple of them and then be like, okay, I've got an idea of what he's done in the last month. I can ignore him for about a month, even though he's doing great stuff, right? I mean, he's growing fast as all heck. So clearly he's got a really good channel. But the creators that I either relate to the most or just are doing the thing that interests me the most are the ones where I watch like every video they put out as soon as they put it out. Jadron Aquatics happens to be fitting into that right now. I watch a lot of Co-op, but I don't watch everything from Co-op. You know, it's similar, right? And there's a joke. Corey told you not to watch it. Like, Corey could tell me not to do something and it wouldn't matter. He's not my boss. He's someone who I share a hobby with and I like his business. But I don't get sponsored, right? I don't work for him. I don't go to him for advice on videos. I think I have once, and that was only because I wanted to know his honest feedback about an idea I had. And his feedback was basically, you will probably spend more money than you'll ever make, but otherwise it could be good. And I was like, all right. And I filed it away for when my garage is done, because I will just do it because I want to. That's it. Like, I do what I like to do because I'm a big boy. But, you know, it's one of those things where, like, lots of creators, I watch in little binges. So, like, a great example would be Dr. Kevin Novak, right? Or Father Fish. I've watched a bunch of their content to kind of understand the things that they teach in, like, a binge. So, like, over the course of a week, I will have watched, and watched is in quotations, usually it's in the background and listening to it while I'm at work. I will go through several months worth of their content, and I don't necessarily watch every video all the way through, right? No, not very many people do that, but I get an idea for what they're teaching in the base lesson. And then I kind of move on to, like, the next person. But there are a couple people that I just watch without fail. And that's just a matter of, like, they're the ones that are, like, just hitting the buttons I need right now so that their content is the most interesting. And it changes. Like, I used to watch Jadron Aquatics, like, 3 years ago. And then I stopped for, like, a year. He went into, like, the same thing of a lot of other creators where I'd watch him for, like, a couple videos here and there once a month. And then I wouldn't watch anything else, and I'd bounce in. I was like, okay, what's he been up to? What's this person been up to? What's that person been up to? Right? And now, like, the stuff that he's doing right now is the stuff that, like, I can't get enough of it. Because it's very, very interesting to me. Another person like Like, let me give you another example, right? Jimmy, right? Editor for Aquarium Co-op, good friend of mine. He is a phenomenal cinematographer and editor. He doesn't put stuff out all that often, but when he does, I never miss it. And he's one of the few people where I set everything aside and I focus 100% on whatever he put out. Because I am trying to learn something from the way that he does the stuff for his own personal channels. Because when he edits for Aquarium Co-op, there's specific stuff he does that fits what Corey wants in those videos. When he edits for himself, I get to see the artist at work. So I watch the artist at work. Dan's Fish, another guy I love. I almost every time I do a giveaway, I tend to give away a gift certificate to Dan's Fish because I love his business. He's doing a series right now about building Dan's Fish, where he's building the big facility, the whole story behind it, building his team. Those videos, as soon as they come out, I'm watching them. Whether it's on my phone, at my computer, on my TV, whatever it is, I watch them. Because I'm very interested in the storytelling that is going on. That interests me a lot. But Dan's live streams, I bounce in them if I can. And when he does like little species spotlights or some of the stuff where he's got in a big order of fish and he's going through them, I don't necessarily watch all of those, right? Even though that interests me, because he gets a lot of stuff that I'm really into, I don't necessarily watch them. But this one particular series, the storytelling that's in it, has me hooked. So I watch it like crazy. There's an example, totally not in the fish world. And I know I'm talking way too long about creators, but I kind of want to like give you a peek into my brain and the way my brain functions. Because obviously I don't care about talking about myself and the way that I as a person am. So yeah. I, for a while, was hooked on the Shane Dawson series with Jeffree Star. The whole thing about making a makeup line. Obviously, I don't use or have any interest in makeup, right? No way. No way does this ugly mug care. But the storytelling and the business of that insane industry was very gripping for me to watch. But I watched like almost nothing else of Shane Dawson's content. To say there's weird things that hook me, and I will watch them without fail. And they'll get my full attention. Which is rare because I don't get a lot of free time. But the few things that do tend to be either very relatable to me as a person, very interesting to me as a fish hobbyist, or they catch my eye and I'm trying to learn something so that I can do better videos long term. That should tell you all you need to know about my fish content and what I watch on YouTube. It's a little weird, I know. But yeah. And sadly, there are some creators that just don't hit those metrics, man. They just don't do it. Tiny channels tend to be more interesting to me because people tend to show you a lot more when they're a small channel. The bigger a channel gets, the more tight and controlled they get on what you see. If that makes sense. Snail Team 6 actually is kind of a great comment. I love KG Tropicals, but they seem to be for newer fish keepers. That's great. We need that. I agree. Their live streams are great. It's a family like here and many other channels. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think inherently a lot of larger channels tend to cater toward new people because more new people will pay attention to your video if it's catered to them. So your audience tends to grow faster. The more dedicated fish people are a much smaller number of people. But those people are really dedicated, right? If you find somebody you love who like teaches you and you're a dedicated hobbyist, you're going to zone in on that. Dedicated hobbyists like me, right? anytime we can learn something, we're hooked. So like the like week that I was watching Dr. Kevin Novak stuff, literally while I was driving into work, I had his videos on in the background. While I was driving home from work, I had his videos on in the background. I'd watch another 1 or 2 videos during the day while I was doing work and just have that audio in my ear. Because I was learning as much as I could about his system, the philosophy behind it, the science behind it. I wanted to understand it to the best I possibly could. So even if things seemed like they were saying the same thing over and over again, listening to it enough times buries that information in my brain. I did the same thing with Father Fish for a while, right? Because I wanted to understand his deep sandbed mentality and kind of what he teaches, what he preaches, because I think it's interesting information. A little peeking in my brain. We won't go too much longer because I've already been babbling way too much. I know. If I missed your questions, guys, as always, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer them. I'm way behind. I need to answer a bunch in the next couple of days. But that's work has been a little nuts. But yeah, I definitely want to get back to you folks for those that are there. And then just in general, I love helping folks out. It really helps. So yeah. Yeah. Mickey M, do you know about CEG 4048 in the UCAPS forum? No. But at some point I'll probably have to look. Dean is next level. I'm very fortunate in that, I have had lots of long conversations with Dean, and every time I'm just captivated. Dean is such a wealth of information, and it's been great that he's been in a lot more videos with Corey, but at the same time, I kind of been a little like this because it's Dean's already limited time has been taken up even more, so I've gotten to talk to him less than I usually do. And part of that's just the pandemic, right? We're not seeing each other every month at club meetings and stuff like that. But man, sitting down with Dean is always a blast. I've had many a very long phone conversation with Dean, and every time I'm learning something, right? It's so great. Bentley, if I wanted to attach a video of the Gymnotus Javari, which I looked that fish up, it looks super cool, to an email to you, what's the easiest way? So probably, if you can send it if you have a Google Mail, send it as a Google Drive link. That's almost always the easiest way to share something. That way it gets around the data limits. But yeah, because like Gmail has a limit on how big a file you can send, but if it goes as a Google Drive link, it temporarily shares it, and then I can watch it. It's probably the easiest way. Let me make sure I get like one more question instead of babbling. Boop. It's all right. Yeah, give Dan's Fish some love. He's giving away $100 gift card tomorrow. Ooh, go watch Dan. Watch Dan tomorrow, dude. Do it. I would. I love that stuff. Fishy Mailman, I tend to forget Peck Tech for a while, then get caught up. I do the same thing. I watch him like once a month, and I catch up on like several of his videos. But yeah. My latest small channel is Freshwater Ichthyology. Very interesting. I know through a friend of a friend who Freshwater Ichthyology is. That's assuming I haven't like gone crazy, that's the other member of Team Bentley. Not Alyssa Bentley, but another person that has Bentley in their name. I want to get like one more question in here. And Alyssa's in chat, so she'll probably correct me if I'm being an idiot, but I'm pretty sure that's right. But yeah. Kathy B, I enjoyed Secret History in your aquarium, aka Alex. Yeah, I mean he's a good kid. Alex, I've known Alex through my club for 3 years now. When I was not super serious about YouTube, I was kind of very minorly doing stuff. Alex just asked to come tour my fish room because he knew a lot of stuff through the club, and that was kind of, I think I had 100 subscribers at the time, and then he did the 2-part tour at my place, and it was one of those days where we spent like the whole day just mostly BSing, and then it was like, oh yeah, we should probably film too. But it was one of those fun things, and we keep in touch. We talk, once a month or so, and yeah, he's been a buddy for a long time. He's a fellow club member, and it's been very fun to watch his channel grow. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah. So there's Alyssa Bentley, right? Last name Bentley. There's me Bentley, first name Bentley, and Freshwater Ichthyology, another person who I believe is also last name Bentley, but not related to Alyssa, who's in what, UK, right? Right. Think so. But like actual ichthyologist, pretty awesome. So anyway, this has been a weird one. I know this stream's been like, it's all over the place. Somebody got me talking about YouTubers, and I'm trying to like explain my philosophy on YouTube content as opposed to like, let's talk junk about other YouTubers. You know that Bentley Pasco guy? He's a jerk. I hate that kind of stuff. I hate drama, but I love like, YouTube is like holding all sorts of stuff for review tonight. But yeah. Anyway, up next, Dr. Black, our Aussie friend with his usual live stream, I do believe, right? Right, Dr. Black, you're coming on, right, buddy? He's probably already left. I saw him in chat earlier, but I gotta make sure. Just gotta see. Yeah. Go have a beverage with Dr. Black. He's coming up next. As we get closer to live stream, or not live stream, but to the talk, I'll let you guys know. If I get a recording of it, it'll go up on the channel. You guys will be able to watch the whole thing. No editing, no nothing. As I throw some screws all over the place. I have a necessity of fidget. I picked up the wrong thing. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Go to the community tab. Vote on the current poll for the name of the new series. I'm hoping that we'll have the first video in that series like about a month from now. I need that much time to work back and forth with the people to like really diagnose their stuff and make sure that like I'm not just like saying the answer and that's not the answer, right? We don't want that. We want to actually make sure that we go through the whole process and then can come back and teach the lessons about that process, right? Lots of YouTubers you can check out. If for some reason I didn't get your question, shoot me an email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Right now, probably like 3 to 4 days, maybe a little bit more to get back to you. There's a few people I know I need to get back to that have gone a little longer than that, so don't worry. I'm going to get you all very, very soon. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. I'll have to, like, pretty soon do something with my dog now that she no longer has a cone and has healed her bum from her surgery. See you, folks.